Welcome to episode 2 of Talent Strategy 60. I am your friendly neighborhood talent strategy nerd, Dr. Jim. And if LB was here, he would be giggling like he usually does when I'm on the podcast and I do that intro. And with me today, I have my always well-coiffed co-host, Nathan Ross. Welcome to the show, Nathan.
Happy to be here.
And for today's episode, we have a monster episode that is prepared for the audience today. So we're going to talk about talent strategy, talent acquisition best practices. And the intent of this show is to offer some best practices from one of the US's top 50 talent acquisition leaders on how you build a center of excellence within talent acquisition. And the person that is going to guide us through that conversation, and there's going to be some important lessons that we're going to pick up, is here with us, Becky Chung. Welcome to the show, Becky.
Hi, thanks both for having me today.
Pretty excited. Yeah, welcome to the show. Hopefully I won't talk over you too much, but I'm super excited to have you on the show. And for those that are tuning in, I want to introduce some of the key concepts that we are going to be talking about today. The first thing that we're going to cover in our conversation is an understanding of what does the talent acquisition landscape look like for practitioners in the field, because that allows for some important context that's going to be helpful in framing some of the solutioning that we're going to get into. Now, once we understand what that landscape looks like, we're also going to learn what are some general best practices if you're interested in building a high performance team. And last but certainly not least, and this is the meat of the discussion, we're going to understand if the intent is to build a center of excellence when it comes to talent acquisition, how do we do that? What's the necessary constraints? What do we need to be considering? And also, we're going to tie in the fact that this is all going to be done in an environment where we're likely facing some recessionary pressures, and how do you navigate all of that? And so it's going to be action-packed. Well, action-packed for nerdy people like Becky and Nathan and I who are into this sort of stuff. So Becky, you are on deck to solve all the problems. All the problems.
In an hour, right? In 60 minutes.
In an hour. We're going to solve all the things in 60 minutes. It's going to be great. So before we dive into the conversation, I want you to set the stage and tell the audience, those that are watching and listening, a little bit about who you are, your background, some of the things that you've accomplished, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Great. So to tell a little bit more about my background, currently I'm the Senior Global Director for Talent Acquisition with Cielo, which is the #1 world provider for talent acquisition partner relationships. I've been in this role with the organization for 3.5 years, and really that global role for the last 2 years through most of the pandemic, and learned a lot about volatility in a market through that. Prior to my experience here, I worked in both the financial services and healthcare industry, more in a talent management, organizational development type roles, and focused on how do you build really successful teams across any type of function, and what are those principles. And what drew me to Cielo and what brought me to the role was taking that approach and understanding all of the motivators of talent, and how do you apply that to talent acquisition? How do you apply business strategy and talent to be more successful and to propel an organization forward?
That is a great intro, and I was predicting that you would leave some important stuff out, so I'm just going to be your hype guy and just throw that out there. So Becky has made an impact at every organization that she's been in. I actually was connected with Becky probably about 5 years ago when she was working at a technology company that was going through a transformation effort where they were going through some aggressive growth, opening up some new markets. And she was the point person designed from a people strategy perspective to help that transformation, and made a lot of tremendous impact there. In her current role at Cielo, and Becky tends to not really say this out loud much, so that's why I'm here. In her current role, she has actually been recognized as one of the top 50 talent acquisition leaders in the US. And that was a award that she recently won. So it's important to know that not only are you talking about somebody that's accomplished and transformed organizations in multiple sectors, she's actually receiving some recognition from her peer group and from the broader world of work for the great things that she's done. So Becky, sorry to put you on the spot and embarrass you,
Yes,
but
I'm humble by a fault.
Yeah, and that's this is just my way of letting the audience know, to borrow one of my favorite lines from Anchorman. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Becky Chung is kind of a big deal. So thank you. So with that being said, let's dive into the conversation. And folks, for those of you who are watching or listening, feel free to drop your comments into the chat. We will be monitoring that. This is designed to be an interactive conversation. If anything resonates with you, or if you have questions, make sure you drop those in. We'll try to get those as we go. So first things first, let's talk about the landscape that talent acquisition leaders are talent acquisition professionals are dealing with currently. Why don't you set the stage for us, Becky, and tell us a little bit about, what the world of talent looks like right now.
Yeah, it's a fascinating market right now. And as a fellow talent nerd, people nerd, one of the things that's so interesting is the different dichotomies we see going on from an economics perspective, from an accessibility to talent, from just a general people perspective. So when we look at what's going on, we're seeing tons of volatility in markets where we're adding jobs, but organizations are also, we're seeing an increase in layoffs in the US on a routine basis now. We're also seeing that individuals are exiting particular fields in droves. And so it's creating these unique challenges. While talent may be available, it's not the type of talent that's needed, or they're not interested in the types of roles that are available. So there's this unique competition that's happening. One of the things that we saw happen through the pandemic was things that were previously perks, working remotely, flex PTO, flexibility in work styles, really shifted from being perks to table stakes, creating this incredible challenge for organizations that aren't positioned because of the type of work they do, the type of industry they're in, to offer that. And it's just creating this very unique challenge in how do you acquire talent when these various factors are going on, let alone you talk about people's motivations. And one of the things I would say we've experienced, and what I like to call it, is the familial focus really came out through the pandemic, where people started to step away and say, I'm going to exit the workforce, or I'm going to be in the workforce in a different way. And so organizations are really having to understand, how do I reach that type of individual who's saying, you know what, financials are important. We all have to have a level of security, but I might be willing to make some sacrifices to have more time with my family. And so again, like, there's all of these unique things that are happening. And this moment in particular, I would say the next few months will be incredibly interesting. July US jobs report blew out of the market blew it out of the water for what everyone thought would happen. What does that mean for August? Especially, when I look at LinkedIn, what I'm reading all the time is about layoffs. When I read the news, that's what I'm reading. So it's a very interesting market right now, and it will be something that's particularly curious to watch for the next few months, not only in the US, which drives so much of the global economy, but globally also, to see what happens.
So there is a ton to unpack in what you just said, and every bit of it is just spot on. I mean, you have all of these factors where the employee-employer relationship has shifted. Employee prioritization of what's important has shifted. And, I think there's a lot to dig in there. I mean, I think we've all seen the impact of the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffle and all that sort of stuff. And your point about, some of the things that we looked at as perks prior to the pandemic became table stakes. With all of that being said, I think it's important to kind of talk about, where are employers currently missing the mark in connecting to what's important to potential candidates. Because I think we have to explore that. Like, from my perspective, it seems like there is a significant gap between, sort of legacy thinking and the current state in terms of what employers are thinking and what employees are looking for. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely. So I think there's a couple of things employers really need to be grounding themselves in. And that's, one of the challenges we all have is sometimes we want to manage to the what if scenario and not the for sure scenario. So, like, we focus on that 10% circumstance. What if this happens? What if it doesn't? Let's make sure that we're focusing on how do we take care of the 80%. And so when I talk about things like that, when we look at rules where we can offer remote options, when we can offer different kinds of perks, like is it a partnership with a local childcare facility? Is it transportation? What are those unique things that you can do and get some economy of scales across because you can offer it to a vast majority of your employees? Look for that creativity and don't get caught up in the fear of what if somebody abuses it? Well, what if? They will. That's okay. Don't disband options and, some incredible ideas just because someone might not use it in the way you intend.
So what you said there is really something that I want to latch into. And that's, what if somebody abuses it? And I think one of the things that, I've kind of, it takes work. So at the desk level, I always try to approach things from the mindset of assume positive intent.
Yep.
And I think as employers, if you're in a talent strategy space, you should adopt that assume positive intent philosophy as a first principle when you're rolling policies out. But there were a couple of specific things that you mentioned that I want to, dig a little bit deeper in. And you drew out the example of maybe flexible childcare options or something like that. And the reason why I latched onto that is when you look at what happened during the pandemic, I forget the exact numbers, but it was something to the order of 2 to 3 million women left the workforce. Yeah. And it's highly unlikely that they'll return. So when you look at that data point, how should employers respond in terms of their work policies to provide a welcoming place for women or any underrepresented group to come in? But in this specific example, make the world of work or make the place of employment much more welcoming to the specific demands and constraints that women deal with. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And it's a global issue. I mean, really, like childcare and child rearing is something that happens everywhere in the world. And as someone who leads a global team, this is something that's become very real for me as a leader of how do I engage with my top talent in different markets? How do I ensure that they have an environment while they're dealing with their home challenges? Myself, I'm a parent. And so I think flexibility and this moving away from everyone needing to be in a 9 to 5 on at the same time and focusing more on outcomes rather than hours in a seat is where employers have a real chance to approach more flexibility, to allow individuals to return to work in a way that supports their lifestyle. Look at things like job share. How can you have some of that creativity, whether that's hour sharing versus work sharing? Can you carve out specific items? There's a lot there. And what you will find is most of these employees desire to return to the workplace in a way that fits their lives. And they're willing to partake in the negotiation. It doesn't have to all be on the employer. There's ways you can connect with various groups to understand more about what does this need to look like in order for it to work for us to engage with this talent population.
And I mean, if this was a podcast episode that I was recording, I would have taken out the focus on the outcomes piece because that is a critical mindset shift that needs to, occur from the employer side to create a more holistic or welcoming work environment. So that's a great point. Nathan, I'm sure you have some questions or comments to add to that. I mean, I've been kind of down, like it's not, I forgot that you were here. You're well-coiffed hair.
I am just listening here, Jim. I am just listening here. But I mean, I don't know. One of the questions that I did have for Becky is, I mean, what is your approach to attracting candidates in this talent shortage? I mean, what are some of the recommendations that you are giving other organizations out in the marketplace to kind of differentiate what they're doing in general?
Yeah. So when I work with my stakeholders and those who, I'm supporting and we're looking at the business, it is those things like, how can we take a flexible approach? if we can't meet, the needs to be remote in this role, what are the things we can do? Can we share that out so somebody can be remote a couple days? Can we look at part-time arrangements? Also making sure that we understand what can we not only sell from the baselines, the table stakes, compensation, all of those things, but what can we sell culturally? And, I very much am lucky with the organization I work for and the things that we can offer, and that this isn't new for us. Like going into the pandemic was just doubling down on the things we already did really well. So I do have that advantage point to draw on, but I've done this at other organizations as well to say, let's look at that and be a little bit more creative and understand what can we work with and take an approach of how can we make it work and why won't it?
Yeah. I mean,
so it's those things of sell your culture. What is great about your culture, but be authentic about it. Don't sell what you don't have. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. I mean, do you feel like that culture piece has taken more of a front seat as things have shifted in this market?
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of that's being driven by the new generation that's changing our workplace. So certainly the focus about wanting to not only have the bare minimum as far as compensation and, feeling valued through the total rewards, it's about also aligning and feeling good about the work you're doing and who you work for and the partnerships that you have, the friends that you make in the workplace. Those things are all continuing and taking some dominance, especially when there's so much competition.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, I think that's one thing that Jim and I talk about on a daily, weekly basis is just that, I mean, there is a generational shift with, and that's what's causing this talent gap. But another question I had for you is, what do you think is the reason for the gap in the first place? I mean, is it just the baby boomers retiring? Is it just a shift from COVID? What do you think?
So there's a couple different things in there. So one, there is just the phenomenon of there being a shortage of pure people that we are experiencing. And we're not quite in the moment yet, but we are quickly approaching that moment. And most countries will have a shortage of people available to do the work here in the next couple of decades. So that is absolutely happening. I do think this change in people willing to re-enter the workforce, certainly we're still seeing that from the pandemic. Inflation and economic impacts will factor in there and what that change is like over the next 6 months. But one other piece that I think is interesting is how we see employers responding now. And this is something that I'm particularly just nerding out on. And that is this globalization that we're seeing happen. So organizations that traditionally have said, no, I can only have people who can physically be on site in my office 5 days a week, are now starting to understand I don't have the skills and talent I need in my community. They've become more comfortable with looking at external communities within their country, but we're also starting to see people open up and become more comfortable with, can I find this talent in other countries? And so that unique element of moving out of just a country-specific talent market or a region-specific to a global market is going to be really interesting to watch and something that I'm particularly keeping an eye on. We've even seen healthcare organizations looking to moving and relocating talent from other markets become more prominent again. There's a lot that's going on there in the global space that is just fascinating and really interesting to watch to see how that's going to affect us here in the next 12 months.
Yeah, as somebody that tends to observe a lot of the same things that you do, I think that's going to be particularly interesting. I think the one aspect of it that I really resonate with when you're talking about all of those different impacts in terms of how hiring is done, access to candidate pipelines and all of that, all of those impacts, is that you're seeing a fairly large democratization when it comes to access to roles across the board. So if the US is facing a talent crunch, where I think some of the information that we've seen is that by 2030, there's like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 gap between jobs and people to fill them. And, that's driven by the fact that when you look at the demographics of who's in the workforce, typically if you're looking at older workers or more senior workers, their job includes like 5 different functional components that they're handling. So essentially one person is doing 5 jobs. And then when they retire or exit the workforce and you're looking for a backfill, oftentimes the position descriptions are laid out in the way that it connects to the person that left.
Mm-hmm.
And you're dealing with a scenario of, okay, well, I have to find this person and they have to do these 5 jobs, and I have a salary band that is not representative of what's required. So you have this sort of perfect storm of, okay, people are exiting the workforce. You have unrealistic expectations theoretically in terms of what position descriptions are saying, and then a talent pool that can't meet the requirements. So when you're looking at solving for the problem of how do I just get more candidates in, what's your advice to talent acquisition leaders in job design, in description design, maybe even the populations that you're reaching out to when it comes to just finding enough people to get interested in the positions that you have? How would you respond to that?
I think that's where becoming a consultant is so important, and understanding your business, the types of work that needs to happen, the types of problems that the organization is facing, so that you can be someone who can consult on those items. So it's the things of looking at, understand what this person did. Is that the way it should be? Let's talk about, could we shift this work in a way that, pulls these 5 jobs, makes it 3 jobs, 2 of these people are here, and it leaves something simple for us. I shouldn't say simple, but simplified for us to approach. I also think data is more accessible than ever. And so if you're in a talent acquisition role, you do need to be educating your stakeholders on what does the market showcase? What are the opportunities to find this talent? What are you going to have to pay to get it? And really focusing in on that negotiation skill. That's something that for my team in particular, as we're bringing people on board, we're really looking for those individuals who can negotiate, who can be persuasive, who can have those kinds of consultative relationships, because that is the only way to get to the talent. And you have to be uncomfortable having those kinds of tough conversations.
Yeah, I mean, navigating difficult conversations and being a consultant and digging in for the root causes is going to be pretty important. I mean, I think you really have to examine some of the underlying problems that exist to kind of come at the solution. So I think for this part of our discussion, and if any of this is resonating for those that are listening, if you have questions on how to increase candidate flow, if you have questions on how can you get creative in terms of making your positions more attractive or more realistic for the candidate pipeline, make sure you drop something in the comments, and then we can circle back. Certainly you can connect with Becky. She's a great resource when it comes to troubleshooting in that respect. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the collective intelligence that is gathered here today and will be on an ongoing basis. So we've laid out the problem pretty well. I think everybody has a clear understanding of all of the competing interests and challenges that talent acquisition leaders and practitioners are dealing with. So how do we fix it? I mean, that's a trite and simple question, but let's talk about how do we turn the tide from an overall enterprise perspective to create the conditions necessary for a center of excellence to be built. So from a team building perspective, so if any organization is looking to build an effective team, what are some of the things that they need to consider, and how do they bring those considerations into action? So what lay out a little bit of what that framework should look like.
Definitely. So when you're looking at building out the team, it's really about getting the right people in from the beginning. And setting the stage with them as they're coming into the organization. So really talking and ensuring that when you're engaging with talent, that you aren't approaching it as an interview, I would say, but more as a discussion about, do our needs match? And so one of the practices I've had with building out our team here is that really talking about, this is what your experiences are going to be, good and bad. Here's what are the challenges I think you as an individual will experience. What do you think I need to know to help you overcome those? Here are the things I think are going to be a challenge for the organization. Really working through those pieces to make sure that you are having an authentic partnership from the beginning. And that's something that I talk to individuals about in their interview, on their first day, and on an ongoing basis in their experience on our team is, there's a couple core things that we need to align to as how we operate as people, regardless of the work. And that's we're going to have trust in each other. And that trust is built on honesty. And so you never get in trouble for asking for help. Because if you ask for help, that tells me you know your business well enough to know when you're struggling. And we can always find help, and everyone struggles. No one's perfect. That we're going to be honest with each other, and that if I see you doing something that I don't think is going to lead to your success, I'm going to tell you, because I care about your success as an individual, not just about your work product. And that one's really, really meaningful. And part of that is me being vulnerable enough as a leader to say, you tell me what I'm doing wrong. And so we have those kinds of exchanges frequently. Even the other day, I was struggling with a problem, and I went to my team and I just said, I'm stuck. Like, as a leader, it does take a lot of vulnerability to be comfortable going to your team and saying, I don't have the answer on this one. It's reached a level of complexity that I need other opinions and help me solve it. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, we had come up with a workable plan that we could get through some solutions. And I knew what I needed to do to honor their needs, and they knew what I needed from them to honor my needs. And so those types of conversations are so important, and not just among leaders, but really bringing your employees into it, because they are incredibly bright. They know where all of your pain points are. They know what's not working. And if you can get them to be comfortable and have security, and like this is this new thing that I'm seeing a lot of people talking about, like security in the workplace. And this is just good human nature, right? Like, this is how you treat your family and friends, is how you should treat your employees. Is really just giving them the place to feel like I can ask for help. I can make mistakes as long as I can be honest and own it, and learn from it. And so trying to build that type of environment really, really has led to the success of this team and our ability to achieve some incredible outcomes, and deliver far beyond than what we've even thought was possible in many occasions, is because they are learning from each other. They are talking to each other. And an important part of that too is we're intentional in creating a very diverse team, not only by individual, but with experiences that we brought in, with locations, with just trying to bring in as many different perspectives and saying, please bring that with you. Be authentic. I will tell the team what I'm great at and what I'm not great at. I ask them to own, I'm great at these things, I'm not great at these things, so that we can fill in for each other. And that kind of environment, I find, has been really engaging for the team. It's allowed us to be innovative, find solutions, find problems, to be honest, and work through the results that we need.
Becky, do you feel like that's a top-down approach to allow team members at the organization to be vulnerable? I mean, do you think that starts with leadership?
Yeah, if your leader's not vulnerable, there's no way anyone else is going to be.
I think it's just tough in general for humans who work together to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. How do you encourage that at a leadership level?
I think it's finding security in yourself to know that it's not your job to always have the answer. Yeah. Sometimes your job is to just know there's a problem to solve. And I have an amazing career coach, and she mentioned she might be here today, but Karen Conrath with Transitions Coaching, please check her out. She's done an amazing job. But, as I've expanded my role, one of the challenges I've had is feeling like I needed to have the answer for 39 different countries, 68 different people. That was overwhelming. And once I could find my own comfort in saying, okay, I can just know there's a question to ask, I've been able to move into that position and really have others come forward with ideas I would never come up with, because they're far brighter than I am. And they know things I'll never know. And so that's been a really great experience for me. And it's truly enriched my role.
So there's something really interesting about a piece of what you mentioned, and that's your comment about working with a career coach.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I'm wondering is that when you are, at any stage in your professional journey, what value does working with a career coach offer you from you in a general sense, from a career progression and just, like navigation perspective?
I would say the value at every level is important. And it doesn't have to always be a formal career coach. You need to have trusted advisors in your back corner who are always going to tell you what you're doing wrong, who are going to call you out, who are going to point out where you have blind spots. And so any individual in any role should make sure that they're building that community around them. I have been blessed to work with many people who have filled this role for me, and have current partnerships who I can go to and I can say, am I seeing it right? Where am I getting in my own way? And in particular, I try to find people who aren't like-minded, who are going to take a very different approach to the same problem. There's one individual on my team who I jokingly tell him, like, he's my no guy. When I have like these ideas that I know aren't right, he's who I pick up the phone and call. And I'm like, okay, walk me through it. I know this isn't right, but I'm here. Like, I think it is, but I know there's something flawed. Let's talk about it. And so we have these great, fun discussions. I have other people where I'm like, I'm having this reaction to this. I feel like I might be feeling this part of myself come out. Let's talk, like, tell me what you're seeing. And so really being able to take that collective approach has helped me get stronger, because then, those situations are ones I can replicate for myself in the next time around.
I mean, I think one of the key things that you just hinted at there is you have to have a level of discipline and self awareness to ask yourself the question. You're seeing something happen. There's stimulus and there's your reaction to it. You have to build the discipline and the muscle to hit pause and ask yourself the question, why am I responding this way? Is this an actual response or is this a biased response? So I think that's an important takeaway just at the dust level in terms of managing your reaction in all the different things that happen from a day-to-day perspective. But the other thing that you mentioned, and I think, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call this out, is you're deliberate in who you surround yourself with. And I think that's an important lesson for anybody that's building a team or joining an organization. I mean, Nathan and I are both at Circa, and our mission and our belief as an organization is that it's the differences that all of us have that collectively make us into a superpowered team.
Absolutely.
So if you're not actively and intentionally building a, I don't want to call it a cohort of rivals, but a cohort of differences or different minded people around you, you're going to have groupthink and you're never going to reach the level of excellence that your potential dictates, because you only have like one narrow view. So
absolutely.
I think, I think, sorry, this is, Becky knows me long enough where, every now and then it's just like, oh, I got to get on a soapbox. I'm just going to let him finish.
I'm starting to learn that too, Jim.
Yeah. Welcome to the club, Nathan. No, but you're right. I do think leaders need to be intentional about this. It is very comfortable to have people around you who think like you. But when you are comfortable, you're often complacent. And so one of the things I really try to strive is to just be a little bit uncomfortable all of the time. It has always been a rule of mine that there should be one person on my team at all times who I feel is so different from me that if we didn't work together, we probably wouldn't be friends. But we work together, so we have a united purpose. We have to have a vested interest in each other. And through that, I learned to have compassion and caring for that person and respect for that person, because they are bringing what I need.
Becky, where did that elevated sense of self-awareness come from? I mean, I don't think too many people would share that same view just because of that discomfort that this person would be too different. We're going to be button heads too much.
Sure.
And I think it's a unique perspective that you bring on that.
So, the vast majority of my career prior to the last 5 years has really been in that organizational design and team development space. And so that's where I've been able to see and practice through others and with myself. How does building that diversity of a function really play out? And what are some of those elements that are so important, like psychological safety? So as I've pursued my own career, I've really tried to practice that. When you think of people like Brene Brown, she really talks about that vulnerability, some of those leadership principles. And there's years and years of research here that's been done to show that these are the types of things that create high-performing teams. So it's been the disciplined, as Jim mentioned, approach or deliberate approach in trying that for myself and see what happens, and seeing that my team just continues to get more successful. Our ideas just continue to get better. It is a common joke that like I will throw out a really crazy idea and half the time I don't even like it, but I just want to try it on for size for a minute. Like, what if we did do this? Like that kind of innovative thinking not only just makes work more fun, but it absolutely has helped my team. I think in giving them a lot more freedom in their role. And that is something that everybody wants and needs to be successful and to feel like they're thriving.
So the reason why I have this silly grin on my face is that your point about innovation and trying stuff out, I'm going to call out the leader that I report into, Jason Bjorson. Like every day I'm probably coming up with some new thing to try. And I think his hairline is going to resemble mine if I keep that up. So there's a line that you have to thread.
I mean, yes. Sometimes you got to dial it down a little bit, but every once in a while you just have to say, well, what if?
I don't know if I'm capable of dialing down that aspect of it, but I want to get I want to get a little tactical about creating the environment for that. So we talked about all the things that are necessary at the enterprise level to build or create a high performing team. You need to create security, trust, innovation, authenticity, vulnerability, all of these different things. So yes, agree.
That's the culture you need for it to work, right?
Yep. So how do we break that down from like a bite-sized, stepwise way to do that? What should managers, leaders, and even individuals at the desk level be doing every single day to create that culture that reflects that? What are some basic things that are probably being missed that you could do tomorrow to create the environment that you're looking to create?
So I'm going to start with the leader seat. And one is start being intentional in the culture that you're creating. And maybe all of these things don't fit for the environment you're in. Innovation might be something that can't be a heavy element of your culture. And that's okay. Be honest and authentic about what can be your culture and start to articulate it. And then start to measure where you're showing up and demonstrating that. And that doesn't take much self-reflection because you can even get that feedback from your teams through things like 360s, through taking your own leadership assessments to understand how you show up in these ways. So definitely encourage that. The second piece then is when you see the behaviors that support it, recognize it. So when someone challenges me in a meeting, I make a point to thank them so that it's known that it's welcomed. I take a point to celebrate it. One of the awards we do, because we say that like asking for help and making mistakes is okay, is we actually celebrate and we make an award every quarter of somebody who took something that just went wrong and fixed it, because it's important to celebrate it. Like, so I'm very intentional in trying to make sure those cultural elements are felt through their entire experience. So leaders need to do that and make sure that it's not just something you say, it's not words, but it's something that the team's breathing and feeling and experiencing. For the employee, take safe tests to see if that truly is the culture, because I'm not going to guarantee you that it will be. But take those safe tests, give the feedback, see what the reactions are. You can take measured approaches in this till you get to that fully comfortable state. And I won't say that I showed up day one like this comfortable. It's been a journey of me doing this and failing and learning and failing and learning and failing. Like we're human.
Yeah. But I mean, I think your emphasis on the doing and failing bit is absolutely critical for any of these career progression or cultural progression items that we're looking for. Because if you're not failing, and my team probably is sighing and groaning when I say this, if you're not failing fast, failing often, and failing forward, there is something critically wrong in terms of the organization or even at the desk level. You have to seek out failure because that's where the leaps of innovation happen. Yeah. And it's not easy to create a culture where that is accepted, because everybody's got a certain amount of fear about, oh, I don't want to screw this up. So that's a tough needle to thread, but I think your point about being open and vocal is important. So that's a good layout of some of the things from a practical perspective that you can do. I think one of the things that's often missed in helping create that environment is regular and meaningful engagement from a leader to a team perspective. When you look at the day-to-day blocking and tackling, what should leaders be doing in terms of demonstrating, not just through words, but through deeds, their commitment to the employees' objectives? Like, how do you build that into your cadence?
Yeah, so there's a few things here, and it's been interesting as my team has grown. Not even 2 years ago, there were only about 15 of us, and now there's 68. So like, I've definitely had to learn how to do this in a very different way as my team has scaled. And so I think there's intentional things you do, as far as I do occasionally pick up the phone and call anyone on my team, and they all know that coming in, that like, I'm going to call you for ideas. I look at metrics, and if I see someone's metrics have changed in a way that kind of surprises me, I don't always work through my leaders. I just call and check on people. What's going on? How you doing? What's happening? Usually through that conversation, we'll get to some fun things. And sometimes I find out what's going on and it's not here, and we work through it. So building that relationship with your team, and also I am present in front of the team. I would say at least monthly, I'm in front of them to have some conversation about what's going on, so they see me representing not only the strategy that we've built, but so they can understand where are we in the vision we've outlined, making sure that team is connecting cross-culturally, cross-regionally, really just trying to continue to foster that environment and have some engagement as a group globally at least once a month.
Nice. And it doesn't necessarily, I mean, that's good. I mean, at the line manager level, I would say, having weekly one-on-ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
And doing that is probably a critical aspect of it too. All right. So, I want to say this out loud before we transition into the Center of Excellence component when it comes to talent acquisition. For those that are watching, and there's quite a few that are watching right now or listening in, if you have questions, this is designed to be interactive. So drop those questions in the chat so that we can answer those on the fly. So I want to transition to, we talked about general best practices in terms of building a high performance team. Let's take a look at how do you do that from a Center of Excellence perspective in talent acquisition, especially given the multiple headwinds that talent acquisition is currently dealing with. So give us a roadmap. You got to solve all of talent acquisition's problems, Becky. And
we got 15 minutes left, right?
you got 15 minutes to solve. So pressure's on.
So I would say that the first part, let's stop away from the culture and the actual talent acquisition people, but focus on the function and the strategy. And you need to build a really strong strategy that's not only reacting to the moment you're in, but is keeping an eye on the future. And the only way you can do that is being well connected to your business strategies. and your business stakeholders. And so that is such an important piece that you have to start with. And if you aren't having those conversations already, work your way to have those types of conversations. Even if you don't have a seat at the table necessarily, figure out who can be that person you can talk to that's helping you understand. You have to be watching the markets. You have to be looking at what's going on, not only locally, but globally, nationally, all of those things. So you need to make sure that you have enough data coming at you that you can be thinking not only in your moment, but what is in the future. Obviously, diversity is going to be incredibly important. It's always been important. But when we talk about things like talent shortages, you need to make sure that you have an authentic strategy to attract more than just your standard employee. And whatever that standard employee looks like for you, it could be that maybe you do have a very diverse population and you have some other, things to consider as far as locations. Be thoughtful and intentional and always looking for where the new places that we can be tapping into new pools of talent, and do it in a way that's authentic, that they can come and thrive. And that's a part that you can't necessarily control as a talent acquisition function, but you have to be working with your business leaders, your HR partners, to make sure that those cultural elements, those performance expectations, those development programs are going to support those individuals. And then you need to be looking at things like, what is your experience? What is the EVP, the messaging that you're giving to candidates that are going to help the right candidate be attracted to your organization? And that also has to be authentic, because there's nothing worse than attracting someone into your organization with all the messaging and the sales pitches and the promises, to have them come and go, this isn't what you promised me. And they're going to leave. Well, now you're doing more work, but you've also created reputational damage. And that's one thing that, like, in my role, I'm particularly aware of, is because there are many times where we're recruiting in a country not on a regular basis, where we don't have as much brand recognition as as we do in other countries. So you have to be far more intentional and thoughtful and mindful of that, so that if you're creating this terrible experience for your candidates, you're going to not have the talent pool you want, because they're going to talk about that. They're not going to return to you. And they might not be the right person now, but in 12 months, they could be. So those are some of the important things. And making sure your team is really aligned to that, understands it, so that their actions mirror it. And so that's where we've gone and said, okay, we know what our strategy is, and we have a roadmap that we've been working this year of, these are the things that we're going to try and change. It's important that they understand that. So my team gets to see it and feel it and hear it and understand how we're moving along on that roadmap, because I want them to be aligned and thinking about what other things could be out there, but also so that they know that this current moment isn't always going to be the current moment. Because this isn't easy work right now. And so having something to look forward to has been really important, to know that changes are going to happen. And then the last piece I would say is, look at your technology. One of the great things about Cielo is it really is a very technology advanced, innovative organization. And so I do get the advantage of being backed by an organization like that, getting to take part, partake in those technologies. And they're incredibly meaningful in how we're able to reach out to candidates, how we can drive pipeline, how we can communicate, find hard to find talent. And so, for me, that's important. I would encourage some organizations, it might be worth it. In many organizations, it is probably worth it for you to explore taking on a talent acquisition partner, especially depending on the challenges you're navigating. If it's large scale increases in talent, if it's having to find incredibly sought after talent, you probably do want to bring in a partner who's going to be backed by that kind of knowledge and expertise.
Those are all really strong points. And I want to zone in on one particular area, which is, hey, if you're trying to solve for talent in general and building a center of excellence from a talent acquisition perspective, you mentioned alignment between strategy and vision. So that's beginning with the end in mind and then working backwards. So that's a fundamental principle. But to get more tactical, I think some of the areas where organizations might run into challenges is in sort of static thinking about what a job description should look like,
Sure.
what a position requirement should look like, what are absolutely necessary to fill a position. And so when you're looking at some of the tactical stuffs, when it comes to removing bias from the hiring process, removing bias from the attraction process, how your job description should be structured, what are the degree or certification or experience requirements, and are those relevant for the jobs that we're looking for? And even you talked about different populations. Like I volunteer for Strively, which is a second chance employment organization. There's millions of qualified people that fall into the ex-felon category or reformed category that are closed out from the world of work.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that talent acquisition professionals need to be thinking about at those levels? So we're talking about people, process, and technology. That's a people solution.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that you could do at the desk level. What's your advice when it comes to tackling those challenges and how they should move forward in solving, some of the baseline stuff that might exist that you're not even aware of at this time?
For sure. There's a lot in there. And that is definitely, when you look at creating, I'm going to put that in the category of like, you are trying to change the makeup of your workforce. There's a lot in there. So you can't necessarily do this alone in talent acquisition. You are going to have to find partners within your organization to test some of these, to get some support to, go through different hiring processes, change the approach. Using data to power those discussions is going to be important. So when you understand your market and you say, if we focus on this and there's 12 people in the world, right, we want to open it up to this by considering these individuals or removing this skill requirement. And now you have access to 12,000. Like those kinds of things are going to be really powerful in changing that. The reason I want to highlight that you can't do this alone in talent acquisition is there is an element of what that person's going to experience once they're in the organization. And so you need to make sure that you are driving that strategy with partners. And so that's going to be external partners. So one of the things that we've been working on is understanding from our external partners who work with different populations, what are the things I need to understand in order to help this person be successful? And not that you can stereotype, but there are going to be some elements and commonalities there that you need to understand. So build those effective partnerships and be open and honest with them of what you think the challenges and the gaps will be, but go in and try to understand that. And then work with your internal stakeholders and partners to drive that type of environment. That's the piece that you can do. One of the ways we saw an immediate amount of success with just having a more diverse talent pool was we changed the diversity of the TA team. And that action alone resulted in significant success because not only is everyone working with somebody who's different than them in a variety of different ways, different experiences, et cetera, they're sharing talent that they view as successful and ideal through many different lenses. And so we just saw that naturally happen through our intentional act there.
So if you're looking to, or giving advice to an organization, Becky, that is looking to evaluate a partner, what are top 3 things that they should keep in mind?
How does it align with their own strategy? Make sure there's a fit for purpose there. So for me, one of the things is my first priority is find global partners. I don't want to have 39 different partners. So where can I find global partners? That's important to my strategy and my organization. That's not going to be important for everyone else. Do they have the resources and the information and the individuals that you want to interact with to fit your needs? Is it too much? Is it too little? Like find those right partnerships and don't be afraid to try and set up short demos or short relationships just to see if it works, but have interactive conversations through those partnerships to hear not only from their perspective, but to share from yours.
All right.
I would say that's important. I mean, there's always the financial element. Many of these partnerships are going to require financial investment. So you have to work within your organization to make sure that that backing is there. That's important. I would say those are probably the two most important things, and that they're accredited and they have a good reputation. This is a market where I think there's a lot of people out there who are doing good work, and there's a lot of people who want to pretend they are. And so you just need to make sure that there's something actually to it.
Jim, what else do you have for Becky?
So there is a lot of ground that we covered. And Becky, thanks for that quick rundown. I messaged this in our live feed. If anybody has questions in how to navigate a talent crunch, certainly Circa helps from a technology perspective there. Cielo can help from a people and process perspective. So there are a lot of partners out there. So feel free to message us and just have a conversation about some of the things that might exist within your organization that you have blind spots with. And we're certainly happy to have those conversations and help you navigate those challenges. I think if we're as we wind down the conversation, I think it's important for people to know where they can find you, Becky. So give us all the deets on where they can reach out to you and get your insights on how to transform their talent acquisition teams.
Definitely. So I am absolutely, of course, on LinkedIn. You can find me there under Becky Chung with Cielo Talent. Otherwise, you can email me at becky.chung@cielotalent.com. And I would love to hear from anyone.
Awesome. So, Becky, this was a lot of fun. And for those that are watching and listening, Becky is going to be featured in another episode of in an episode of the Cascading Leadership Podcast. And that's going to be on the topic of navigating difficult conversations. So you should see her getting tagged in all of my promo pieces when those things come out in a couple of weeks. And that's going to be a part of the HR effectiveness series that we have coming out on the podcast that Lawrence and I run. So Becky's going to be all over the place. So you have another opportunity to learn some things from Becky. So for those of you who have tuned in and listened, thank you for tuning into this live session. It was a lot of fun in terms of conversation. We will be doing this every week. And next week, we are going to have a DEI focused topic. And that's going to be in the area of how do you build an effective DEI practice and what's the framework that you need to think about to launch it successfully. So we're going to have another leader in the talent strategy space talking to us about that particular topic. And who knows, we might get crazy a little bit down the road and have like panel discussions and stuff like that on relevant topics. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Don't be surprised if you see Becky back on one of those panels when that comes to fruition. So for those of you who are tuning in or have tuned in, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the interaction on the chat. If there's particular questions, make sure you message us directly. We're happy to help. But until next time, we will see you on Talent Strategy 60. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Becky. Nathan.
Thank you, Becky. Yes.
Thank you both.
Nathan, your hair is epic as usual. So let's run it back next week, 12:30 Central Time on Fridays. All right. Have a good rest of the day after everyone.